And so the question I kept coming back to Russell with is, why is he telling this story? Why now? What is the upside for him of telling this story? And it's still somewhat of a mystery in the film.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, a draft dodger recalls his journey in his later years in director Paul Schrader's drama, O Canada. The film tells the story of Leonard, who fled to Canada to avoid serving in the Vietnam War during his youth. Now in his twilight years, and having had a successful career in film, Leonard recalls his secret history in hopes of demythologizing his life. In addition to O Canada, Schrader's other directorial credits include the feature films Master Gardener, The Card Counter, First Reformed, Affliction, Light Sleeper, Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, American Gigolo, and Hardcore. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theatre in New York, Schrader spoke with director Alex Ross Perry about filming O Canada. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to watch.
It feels like I was here just yesterday, but it was a week ago at this time I was here with Pablo Lorraine. There were more people for Pablo than for me.
He doesn't live here, so it's harder to catch him. Thank you for coming to have this discussion about this film. I want to start at the end of the process, which I find to be under-discussed, but also my personal experience with this movie, which is that this film, like many of your last handful of films, you had the privilege of seeing a rough cut of. You're very generous with sharing what I consider to be, when I see the finished version, nearly complete work in progresses for feedback. I'm wondering if you could talk about your process in finishing this movie, movies in general. You show us these films and you ask such specific questions. And then I talk to someone who was at another screening and they say, he didn't ask any of that. He asked completely different questions. And then I see the finished film and I think, seems exactly the same. How do you know when your process is over? How do you find the post-production?
I write very close to the bone. If I can figure out at the writing stage that I'm going to cut a scene, I don't shoot it. So there's every setup in this film was used. There was no. I shot an epilogue. That's the only thing on the cutting room floor. So you write close to the bone. You shoot close to the bone. That means the editing process doesn't go on that long because you don't have that many alternatives. And the only thing you don't really know in the editing process is whether people don't get things. So, it's a two-part experience. One, you have to sit in a room and you can actually feel it. You can feel whether the room is alive or not. And I remember I sit in a room and saying, I'm losing them. I'm losing them right now. I'm losing them right now. And then I have to address that in the next edit. Why did the energy go out of the room at that during those two scenes? And then you also ask, things you don't what did you understand? And try to formulate questions because viewers, are not very good at helping you out because they're not movie people. When I see somebody's film, I can help them out, but ordinary viewers can't. So you have to guide them and say, right here, did you understand, why he did this, and and what scenes do you think were actually happening, and which things was he making up? Now, there's no answer to that question because the film doesn't provide those answers, but it's very interesting to hear what people come up with when they're pushed to give an answer.
Because you, in my recollection, said something like, show of hands, we're watching a movie about a guy whose central issue is his abandonment of his son, or a guy whose central issue is his abandonment of his country and the sense of cowardice. And there was a bit of a conversation, and it felt like you were searching for when you hit this balance of people saying to you, I'm seeing the movie that you want the movie to be.
A similar thing on First Reformed. I would ask people, is he alive or is he dead at the end? Because there's a good argument made for either one. And I kept jiggering it and editing until finally it got to be about 50%. Half the people said, no, he miraculously survives at the end. The other half said, no, he dies, and this is a vision of his that he has while he's dying. And that was exactly right. I said, great, I'm at 50-50. And then people asked me, which is it? I said, I don't know, which is why I wanted to get it to 50-50.
And what was the unanswerable on this one?
The unanswerable, which is also a question I asked Russell, because Russell was alive when I wrote the script and we were close friends. He died about a week before I finished. And so the question I kept coming back to Russell with is, why is he telling this story? Why now? What is the upside for him of telling this story? And it's still somewhat of a mystery in the film. Why at the end of his life does he have to tell this story? And I remember saying to Russell's widow, Chase, at one point, I said, I think Russell exaggerated his bad qualities because it was more interesting to him, not because he actually was bad. And Chase laughed. He said, that's exactly it. So he creates this sort of dismal portrait of himself when in fact men have multiple wives and they live with families. And I kept saying to Russell, he's not quite bad enough. And so I added a scene where he turns on his own son, which is, bad in a biblical kind of way. So, but that wasn't in the book.
And that's a hugely impactful moment, memorable, changes the entire makeup of who this guy is, essentially.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you shoot no fat, you use every setup. And that was another thing I wanted to ask about, because this has been something you've been saying for several years. Films have gotten smaller, budgets smaller, schedules shorter. And the way you've spoken about this has been so fascinating and inspirational, where you've said versions of what you just did. If it's going to be a deleted scene, you don't shoot it. That's time wasted. That's time you need for another scene. Can you talk about how you've adapted overall to the way these last 5 or 6 films have been made?
You start to figure out what the right page count is. Well, it all comes down to the oral tradition. So the idea starts, you start outlining it, you tell it. Outline it, tell it. Every time you tell it, new ideas come to you and you redo your outline. So finally, and you're doing a page count on your outline, and finally it's getting up there, getting to be 80 plus pages. So it's, and then one of two things happens. They're both very good. One is the idea dies and you give up on it and you don't have to write it. The other is the idea gets sick of being told over and over again and it just jumps out of you like an animal. And so that's kind of my process. And if I can hold you with a story, say, I met this guy, Alex, in front of the DGA theater. He was drunk. He was having problems with his wife. We went and had a bar. Okay, boom, boom. Now I'm telling you a story.
Wait a minute. This sounds very, very personal.
And if you can hold somebody's attention for 45 minutes, you have a movie.
Yeah, you said something once. I'll repeat this just as advice. You said, when you think you have a movie, hang out with friends, coffee, meal, tell them the story of the movie, leave at an impactful part in the story to go to the bathroom, come back and see how long it takes them to say, so what happens next?
Yeah.
I highly recommend doing this. I've been doing this ever since you told me that this is a great way.
And if they don't ask, then you know you're in trouble.
Now you're saying that this process leaves you when you're shooting. The script is lean, all the fat has been removed. How do you operate this with the crew, where sometimes there are scenes that you always feel people saying, like, this is kind of an easy one. Exterior shot, the guy's walking from his car into the building. And for you, you're saying, guys, it will be in the movie. Everything we're shooting is going in. How does this operate?
But also it goes the other way. Like I did a shot on, I forget which film it was. I think it was Car went out. And it was a 3-shot. And I did that conformist thing where you knock the light and the light goes back and forth. And I was doing a 3-shot, and I said, I didn't want to do some overs and singles. And I said to the cinematographer and to the AD, we got anything else ready to shoot? He said, well, tomorrow we're supposed to start this scene, but it's in the same location. I said, okay, I'm going to live with that 3-shot. I'm not going to cover it, which means that you cannot shorten it in post. You either have to show it at full length or cut it out. Now, that's just a call you make on the set. That shot is so damn good, I don't want to cut it. And if I do coverage, I'll have an excuse to cut it. The editor will want me to cut it. Somebody will want me to cut it. And if I don't shoot the coverage, I'll just say, I didn't shoot any coverage. And then those are the calls you make. I'm sure we all have to make those calls, but because the budgets are so tight. Back in the day, when you had more time, do a master, do a reverse master, you cover the hell out of everything. But that scene that took a full day 30 years ago takes half a day now. When I began filming, 44 days was the average day count on a film. Today is 20, 21, literally half. So you're going twice as fast. Now, a lot of that is due to the technology, but also some of it's doing is that you've learned how to go fast.
So with that in mind, O Canada is one of the more visually and aesthetically challenging movies you've made. You've made a lot of films recently that are very static in the framing by design. You've used the phrase boredom as an aesthetic tool to me many times. This film is much looser, plays with all sorts of visual tricks, aspect ratios, color, black and white. What was your sort of rule that you set for yourself on O Canada, and how did that?
The novel was a mosaic of memory, confabulation, and memories true and false. So Russell was jumping all over. But Russell did not have the tools that a filmmaker has. He was writing print. What do you have? Boldface, italic, all caps. It's about all you can do. We in film, however, have many more tools. We have screen ratio, we have black and white, we have colors, we have aging of film, we have color balance of film. And so that you can separate the pieces of the mosaic so that the last day is 144, kind of Gordy Willis, dark hued. And then the trip from Richmond to the Canadian border is widescreen, all blown out, sort of Owen Roisman. And so then there's the black and white stuff. And then I had a little section with Cornell, which I decided to shoot in that Ingmar Bergman shade of red orange. And so that all the scenes with him, I painted the room that color. So those are the tricks you can do on film that you can't Russell can't do it in a book. He can't suddenly put pink pages in the middle of a book.
And all these choices, as we see in the finished film, these were, you didn't say in post, oh, maybe we should crop this and like make this ratio, or this scene should be in black and white. These were choices. These were filmed in black and white. You had the monitor set for this aspect ratio. And
yeah, we were using the black and white camera, the new Arri black and white camera. So it wasn't color, just turned out. And it's again one of those things where you say, I'll commit myself to doing it in black and white. I'll shoot it in black and white, and then I can never change my mind. And also, the blacks are never really black when you shoot color.
Hadn't you vaguely dreamed of making First Reformed in black and white? Do I remember this correctly? And the distributor said, no way, or am I just completely inventing that?
I think you are. I don't quite remember, but I certainly would have thought of it because the prototypes were black and white. You know, the Bergman, the Dry, or the Bresson. So that would have been a natural thought to do it in that way. But instead, I used the technique of not only did I not, I made $1 in the film, but I did, so I did no camera moves, but I also didn't pan or tilt. Now that's very very few people. If you're sitting there and you stand up, do a little tilt up, everybody does it. If you walk a step off the frame line, the operator is going to catch you. And I said, no. I said to the operator, if he walks out of the frame line, I'll say cut. Don't accommodate him. Because I don't even want any pans or tilts anywhere. And then I also said I didn't want any music, but I changed my mind and did music in the third act
of First Reformed.
Yeah.
So then for O Canada, any other you just listed all the visual choices we've seen now. Did you set yourself any of these challenges either in the adaptation or in the 20-ish days you had of saying like this time, camera operator, we're not doing this, or this one feels a little bit looser because the memories are subjective and the slippery aesthetic is therefore almost justified in what the character is experiencing?
Yeah, and also I had a half an hour in a static room interview. And so you have to find a lot of angles, and you have to move from time to time. It just sort of dies on you. So yes, we did move. We moved. I've done some films where I wanted to move every single setup. This one, we moved about half the setups. But if there was a move to be made, just even a gentle one, what we in the business call a Mickey Rooney, which is a dolly move, a short dolly move, and it's called that because it's a short creep, so they call it a Mickey Rooney.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. You've made not very many films where the protagonist is an artist. You've made some, Light of Day, but it is something I feel like you avoid. You find characters that are sort of privately a philosopher.
I really avoid it. I have found that the closer something is to me autobiographically, the less good it is. I need to put some metaphorical distance. I made a film that was sort of about my father, and made another one that's sort of about my mother, the two of my weakest. But if I can find some occupational distance, a taxi driver, a drug dealer, poker player, then I can get at it more than if it's autobiographical. Now, I would have never, ever on my own made a film about a filmmaker. Never. I would have made it about a painter. But Russell felt the same way. He's a novelist, and that's why he made it about a filmmaker, because he would want to make it about a novelist. So I was kind of stuck with Russell's unwillingness to make it about a novelist.
Did you struggle with that at all? Because it just, anybody who doesn't have the luxury of hearing you speak would just say, oh, this seems like an autobiographical confession. The man who left his will on film. Here's a filmmaker looking back and making this thing. I bet he has this son. He won't, this is a very common, anyone could make this mistake because the film seems so auto-fiction-y. And yet, if you don't notice, it's based on a book. Was this a struggle to sort of separate yourself from this character, to tell the actor, really don't even look at me when you're trying to find who this guy is, find him in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I as I said before, I was fortunate enough that Russell was alive through the writing of the script. So a lot of these things I was able to hash out with him, and you go back and forth. I mean, this film came about because he got sick. He was a good friend of mine. We did Affliction every summer. I went up to the Adirondacks and spent a week with him. And a year and a half ago, I called him and said, what's a good week this summer? And he said, it won't be this summer. I have cancer. I'm taking chemo. And he had written a book about the death process when he was healthy called Foregone. And I had never read it. He had sent it to me. I never read it. I said, I better read that book now. And I read it. And then I said, it's time. It's time to make a death movie. And you can't make a death movie on your deathbed. You can write a death poem on your deathbed. David Bowie can do a death song, death video. But when you make a film, you have to be pretty healthy. So you have to decide to make your death film while you're healthy. And I said, it's time. It's time to do it. And I had some health problems, so I thought, might not actually be. But now I'm feeling better again, and I have to figure out how to make a postmortem film.
I've heard you use that phrase before, it's time, as though for First Reformed, your Bressonian influence was calling out to you, and now you're saying it again. Do you feel that lately, with this prolific pace you've had in the last several years, these projects are picking you? How urgently do you feel like some of these ideas just grab you and say, it's time, you have no choice, you're making this movie and you're making it now?
Yeah, well, I just finished a script. I've finished 2 scripts in the last 6 weeks, but one of them I wrote with my assistant in 8 days. And a personal wound had happened to me. I won't describe it, but I was reeling from this personal wound. And I thought, I've got to cauterize it. And the only thing I know how to do is turn it into art. And that's why that one came so fast, because the wound was deep and it needed instant cauterization. And as soon as I realized that, I immediately came up with an idea. And then I had to change the idea enough so it wouldn't be so specific to this, so it could be somebody else's wound too.
Did you, I don't really know how to pivot from that. It's a very heavy answer. Did you look at filmmakers to base Leonard on, and you couldn't avoid doing the film about a filmmaker?
Well,
you see a little bit of Errol Morris in this device. You've obviously had friends.
A little Frederick Wiseman.
Yeah, and you talked, I know, at the screening about what kind of documentary filmmaker was he. I guess I'm asking both about him as a guy and him as a filmmaker, because we see a lot of him as a guy and just a few moments of him as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, I did, when I was a critic, before I became a filmmaker, did interviews, So I interviewed Don Baker. I interviewed Don Baker, but I also interviewed Don Pennebaker, and Wiseman, and I knew Errol. So I sort of knew that tradition, and I decided to use that Interrotron of Errol's just so I would have a physically more interesting set.
And then the work itself, you kind of combined. It's licensed film. It's licensed footage when we see Leonard's films in this movie, right? Or did you create it?
What?
When we see the clips of Leonard's movies at his ceremony. Did you make those, or was that?
I did the crop dusting one because Jake is in it. But the seals and the native, I would say Native American, but it's not. The Native Canadian stuff was, that's the way it is with YouTube and Getty Photos now. People go out and just shoot stuff and they'll put it in their library. So if you're sitting there and you're saying, I want a shot of the Country Music Hall of Fame, well, you don't have to go to Tennessee. It's in somebody's library. Somebody has already shown it to you, and they'll sell it to you for next to nothing. Or shots of people just shoot driving around New York, driving around various cities. And if you're thinking of you need something for your blue screen, you don't have to really shoot it yourself. You can buy it.
I found that as well. It's fascinating with VFX stuff too. You can find a shot of outer space. And I'm gonna, if anyone has a question, I'll get it ready as I ask this one other, perhaps final from me comment. As I keep mentioning, you're working constantly. You're mentioning new scripts, new projects. What is inspiring you these days about cinema, other than the wealth of footage you can license without leaving your house? What is making you feel so inspired to keep offering new films that are different from each other, different from the other dozens you've made?
Well, every time I think I'm going to die, I get a new idea. So then you say, oh, God, that thing we were talking about a couple of weeks ago about maybe the end of my life, can we put a pin in that, hold that off for another year? Because I got this idea. So, anyway, it's kind of perverse because the moment I start saying my career is over, this is it, something inside me comes up with a new idea.
And you have to see it through.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Which if you do, I'll repeat after you ask it. We'll start right here. Question was about double casting, specifically a moment when Richard Gere enters the frame. I think you're maybe talking about when Lordy's given this offer to
Richard exits screen, right? Lordy enters screen,
and then also she asked about Uma Thurman playing two roles.
Yeah. Well, also Penelope Mitchell plays two roles because he's confabulating. He takes the assistant Sloane, who has that purple hair. And when he remembers his first wife, Amy, he takes Sloane and puts her into his memories. So the same actress who plays the assistant plays his first wife. And then I did the same thing with Uma, who plays his current wife, and he remembers his college buddy's wife, who he cheated with. And of course, he takes his current wife and sticks her back there. And in the same way, all of a sudden he'll stick himself into his memories. But he's now old and dying. So most of his memories are when he was younger, but occasionally he'll get mixed up and he'll have himself be in his 50s and fit. So Jake and Lordy walks out of the bedroom and Richard walks back in. They're playing the same character at the same age. The wonderful actress named Christian Forsyth. I hope to work with her again. Anyway, we shot a scene in the morning. She did a scene in bed with Jake. The afternoon, she did bed and scene with Richard. I said to her at the end of the day, Kristen, you're never going to forget this day. And she won't.
There's somebody a few rows back. Did you shoot the scene with both actors in it just in case it didn't work out to have?
No, you that's a luxury I cannot afford. You have to make your call. Now, of course, when Richard sat on the edge of the bed, there was a mirror there. So I shot Jake sitting on the edge of the bed so that you could see Richard, but in the reflection of the mirror, you would see Jake. But no, you just have to make those calls because you don't have the money or the time to protect yourself, and that's a good thing, because that was old Hollywood. Protect yourself, cover everything, But those are also the days when often the director wouldn't be in the editing room. And so you just handed everything over and went on and made another film. But now directors micromanage the entire process, from pre-production through release.
I think that's probably it, unless there's time for one more. Yeah, yes, maybe. If there's one more, we have time for it. If not, I can wrap it up off of that. So to that point, I was going to say I'll have one more, unless you want to leave.
No.
This is just about what you said. So this is now for you with you have to know. This is just about walking onto set, and I've seen you do this with the utmost confidence. This is the shot.
Yeah. I
know the edit. How do you convey that to these actors who are, maybe you have them for 10 days, convey that to a crew you maybe have never worked with this crew member before?
Well, the most extreme example is you shoot a master. And you watch the master and you say, when does the coverage kick in? The coverage kicks in on this line. And so you go shoot that over and you say, let's not do the whole scene again. It'll take too much time. Just pick it up from this spot right here. And you just shoot that little piece that you're going to need. And then you cover that little piece. And of course, the editor is furious. And I don't know, the editor of this film called me up and he said, this stuff is coming pre-cut. There's nothing more for me to do. It's like the sprockets have little arrows, because if you don't shoot something, he can't put it in.
Yeah, there's a chapter of movie I made, Her Smell, that I made around the time I was observing you making First Reformed. And for one chapter, so for 4 days of filming, we shot it this way. The camera never moves. Exactly you're teaching. Someone walks through a door, stay on that door for a few seconds. It's incredibly hard to do this. It's also very easy because you don't have to think once you've made the decision. You just have to figure out where is the cut. And I will say in closing, a lot of these lessons you teach, you talk about your observations on the way filmmaking has changed. It's incredibly useful, I find, for people just to think because you always find, I feel, think very creatively about each project. You figure out the rules for each project for the maximum efficiency and the shortest line to the movie you see clearly from the minute you know the story before you even write it. And I think that O Canada looks like someone knows exactly the movie they were making.
Well, I began as a critic, and the way a critic sees a body, is the way someone in a mortuary sees a body. You're looking at this body and you're trying to figure out how it lived, how it died. You want to take it apart. How an artist sees a body is the way he looks at if he's a man, his pregnant girlfriend, wife. Not do I want to examine this, how can I sustain it? How can I make sure that this thing is born alive? And so those are different mindsets, and I came from the medical examiner's mindset of criticism. So I have to occasionally slap my hands because I'm not letting the pregnant person breathe. I'm already cutting her up.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Paul, for sharing O Canada and all these tidbits with us.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.